Hello, I'm Sandeep Tyagi, your host for the brand called You. And the brand we are speaking with today is Alok Aggarwal. Alok is the CEO and Chief Data Scientist of Scry Analytics. In December 2000, he had also started and co-founded the company called EvaluServe, which grew to 4,500 people in many, many countries. And prior to that, he established IBM's research lab in India. He's also worked at MIT and IBM Watson Research Center. So he's a man of many talents. He's got a BTech from IIT Delhi, which I share with him, though he was many years my senior. And he's got a PhD from Johns Hopkins. He's got over 100 research papers and 8 patents. So we are delighted to have you, Alok. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Really happy to be here.
Let's get started with your professional journey. Tell us about Scry Analytics. First of all, what does the name actually mean? And I was reading about it a little bit. You've talked about AI, and I've heard a lot of stories, but maybe you could tell us a really interesting implementation or actual impact that you're having using AI at Scry.
Sure. So first about my story, I would start by saying I'm an accidental entrepreneur. And it all started, as you rightly pointed out, because I started IBM India Research Lab during 1998 and year 2000. So we started in January 1998, grew it to 30 PhDs, 30 masters. And it started in a very interesting way because my boss at that time, who was head of research, Dr. Paul Horn, he said, I will act as your VC. Here is $3 million. I expect you to use it in the best way to grow IBM India Research Lab and make it famous. So that was my first foray into actually starting something new with a different goal. I mean, the goal was not to increase revenue for IBM, but more to increase branding and marketing. But then, as you rightly said, in December 2000, January 2001, we started EvaluServe with the co-founder, Mark Wollenweider, who had moved from McKinsey, Zurich to McKinsey in Delhi. And we met in April 2000 because our kids were going to the same school, American Embassy School in Delhi. And our wives met and they put us together. So that's how we started. And then I quit to start Scry, which we will discuss a bit more. But the reason I call myself an accidental entrepreneur is because when I graduated from Hopkins with a PhD in basically AI in theory of computer vision, I never had ever imagined that I would become an entrepreneur. In fact, I wanted to be a professor. So I joined IBM Research to do a lot of research and publish papers so that I can get a good tenured position in a college or in a university. Happened to be on a sabbatical at MIT in 1989. And then I realized that I don't want to be a professor. And because it requires a lot of being on committees, writing NSF proposals, and a lot of stuff which we were not doing at IBM Research. So I came back. So life has changed every 5 or 10 years for me. And that's why I don't ask people when I'm interviewing, what will you do in 5 years? Because pretty much everything has changed. So that, in short, is, how it all started. The word Scry actually is an English word. You can use it in Scrabble, convert cry to spy. It means crystal ball gazing or fortune telling. So Nostradamus is considered the biggest Scry because he wrote all the futuristic quatrains and so on. And given that we are creating products which are with respect to predictive analytics, we are predicting the future. Whether an excavator will die in the next 60 days, whether a person will return or a company will return the money in the next 60 days or 90 days, whether the supply chain will be broken in the next few months or few weeks. So a lot of what we are doing, a lot of what AI is about predicting, forecasting the future by looking at the past data. So Scry essentially is somewhat based on the model of IBM Research or Bell Labs or Xerox PARC. my view, when I spent about 16 years at IBM Research, and my view at the end became that if IBM Research or Xerox PARC or Bell Labs or now Google DeepMind had their own consultative salespeople, they would be by themselves trillion-dollar companies. They had to rely on salespeople from IBM divisions and who did not really understand, who would rather sell hardware, whether it was AS400s or supercomputers, did not really understand what IBM Research does. And therefore, in spite of the fact that there is a lot of innovation in these areas and in these companies, divisions particularly, it was not getting sold. So we basically, fundamentally, I would say we are an R&D company, but we use R&D to create products. We have 6 products, out of which we are selling 6 product lines, out of which we are selling 3 very, very strongly. And we have consultative salespeople. So we started in February 2014. So I won't call it a startup anymore. We're about 320 people, out of which around 40 are in San Jose, in Silicon Valley, where we have we have a complete R&D center. We only hire masters and PhDs. And then in Gurgaon and in India, Pune and Hyderabad. Again, we have another 40 who are deeply into research, another 60 who are in advanced development, and the remaining managing various products and upgrading them.
Wow, that's a sizable team for deep research. Or so give us some examples. What are the 3 products that you have built up, and maybe take us a little deeper into why is it, how is it connected to the cutting edge research that's being done?
So the first one is Colatio. All of them have effectively Latin names because we wanted to get trademarks. So Colatio in Latin, it's pronounced as Colatio. Colatio is same as collation or putting things together. So it's all about taking data which comes in PowerPoint presentations, SharePoint, PDF documents, scan documents, you name it. I mean, you can XBRL, XML, and so on, converting it into electronic data, and then doing something with it. Now, let me take the example of scanned page or a picture. Let's say you have a picture, you want to convert it. Now, this has been around for at least last 30 years, called optical character recognition. Now, and we've been improving optical character recognition and its accuracy quite a bit. Currently, most of the companies who are in this business will give you 90 to 92% accuracy. So you're given, let's say, a table, or in fact, let's start with text. You're given text. And if it's a bad document, not that legible, then it'll probably be more like 85%. If it's a good document, like 95%. You are, let's say, an insurance company, and I come to you and say, I can do or OCR, or optical character recognition, very well. And my accuracy of my system is 90%. Your immediate question is, that's great. I have documents which are 300 pages. Now, would you be able to tell, your system be able to tell me as to where is likely to be wrong? Because I have to read the whole 300-page document, and then you're not saving me that much time, or that much time. But if you could, even if you're 90% accurate, or your system is 90% accurate, you can even tell me 20% of the places where you would be wrong, but the 80% are all correct. Then I'm good to go, because I only have to look at 20%, and therefore you have, right off the bat, you've saved me 80% time, and therefore money. So Colatio basically is an intelligent document processing and reconciliation system. Could say upfront as to where it is likely to be wrong. So, and where it has been able to reconcile. So it reconciles in many different ways. One of them, for example, in a table, let's say income statement, if attribute A plus attribute B plus attribute C equals D, that's what you see. Like in revenue, you would see revenue from products, revenue from services, revenue from other sources, total revenue. So it, on the fly, just like a human, it understands that there is a formula there, and that there is a formula A plus B plus C equals D in this particular document, and every document is different. In this particular document, there is a formula there. And then it uses that to see whether the formula actually, the numbers actually add up or not. And they
I
could
see.
addition, subtraction, multiplication. For example, in W-2s, which in the US you get at the end of the year, you'll get a person will get the salary. Let's say it's 100,000, and Social Security tax on that salary should be 6.2%. So
Sure,
it
sure.
figures out, after seeing a few W-2s, it figures out that, look, the formula is 6.2%. And if it actually shows that the Social Security is 6,200, it has figured out that indeed both of those numbers are correct. Or
Got
Medicare
it.
tax, which is 1.45%. So I just gave you
So
some
is this
formulas, but it could be with names like Alok Aggarwal or John Doe and so on. It could be addresses. It uses many different ways to reconcile, both within a document
now?
and across the document.
Yeah, yeah. These, I guess, heuristics or these rules for how to validate something, that revenue may be broken down or address has to be this form or social security is 6.2%. Do you end up using a lot of rules like if then statements,
So
or these are somehow deciphered from the documents
these
themselves?
are deciphered from the documents. We humans are so creative, and we'll maybe talk about artificial general intelligence, which I don't believe in, that we are anyway close. The reason is we humans are so creative.
Mm,
We love to break all rules, even
mm,
for well-structured documents which are following international financial reporting standards, IFRS or GAAP. Even then, the accountants will change things around, will add things up, down in different ways, and so on and so forth. So you cannot, a business rule system by nature will fail automatically. So the whole area aim is just like we train our children, you train machines to learn the same things in a different way so that you can then test them and they learn how to decipher formulas. So this,
so does it work with a version of truth? You need to have a sample set and say these ones are accurate, or how does it extract and know that these things, how does it differentiate between something which is a balance sheet versus something, let's say, which is a list of telephone numbers?
yes, very good question. So it basically figures out from a balance sheet, it figures out using natural language processing that the key words or key terms are
Mm,
those related to a balance sheet, as opposed
mm,
to those income related to an income stream. For
mm.
example, a balance sheet is likely to have key terms and keywords related to assets, liabilities, and equity,
Sure.
whereas
Mm.
income statement would have revenue and profit. Now, they may not be calling it revenue, they may have a different name for it. And that's where natural language processing and a lot of semantic searching comes into picture, because the syntax may change, but the semantics usually does.
So, are you training these models? Or are you using any of the large
So
models like
these are
chat? Or,
yeah. So these models are mainly trained models. We have trained over the last since 2016. So they
mm,
are very strongly trained in figuring out, and that's why we have trained it on about 160 different document types. Now,
mm.
because we have trained it on 160 different document types, new training for a new document types becomes easier. The
Very
problem
interesting.
with using large language models or GPTs is twofold.
Mm,
One, they've been trained on 400 million to about a billion pages of words, mainly words, very few tables, very few formulas, and so on. So they're not able to decipher formulas. In fact, they go wrong on
oh,
formulas by and large.
oh,
They even go wrong on tables by and large. So
mm.
if the human is really creative and creates an interesting table, they will be only 70%. And
Got
the
it.
important part of Colatio is table recognition, table extraction, and table reconstruction. And
Mm.
similarly for graphs and charts. So suppose you have a bar graph, vertical bar graph, or a horizontal bar graph. You want to extract all that.
Very interesting. So you have trained your own models. Are these gigantic models with millions of
These are
parameters, billions
fortunate.
of
I mean,
parameters?
gigantic is all relative, right? So we used to think they're all gigantic models. Now we don't think so because they're about 2 gigabytes in total memory. And when you
Yeah.
look at typical Llama 3.2, which is a open source GPT, it's more like 96, then 92 to
Right.
96 gigabytes in. So from
Right.
that perspective, I'll say it's a small model. But
Got it.
again, there are small language models also, which are 2 to 4 gigabytes. So it's reasonable. We've trained it on about, I mean, we can't afford to, and we haven't trained in 400 million pages, but we've trained it on about 100, on about a million pages worth of important data that is important to us. And therefore, we're
That's very
getting very good
impressive.
at it.
Very impressive. Very impressive.
It has taken us 8 years, but 8 years, but we're getting there. We're getting to the human level accuracy. So within the company, and I'll talk about this in a minute, we call the minimum accuracy required, which is 90%. Gold level is 95%, and human level is 98.5%. It's not that we are always accurate either. In fact, you give a really bad microfiche or a typical Indian fax from 1990s or 2000. I mean, most humans won't be able to understand what is written. And so we are trying to get to the 98.5% accuracy, human level, within the next year and a half, with the hope that the remaining 1.5, we can show actually these are the 5% where humans should be looking at. So it becomes a maker-checker problem that we see all the time in various business process outsourcing. Somebody is doing the invoice, converting invoices, somebody is checking it. So we want the maker to be an AI system and checker to be human, and the checker only spends 5 to 10% reviewing everything.
But to identify where the confidence level is low, do you use a separate expert system, or to kind of like evaluate whether
Yes.
this would
So
be?
this is all, and that's probably happening with humans too, that there are independent algorithms which are working in conjunction with each other. That look, this doesn't make sense. And so there are independent algorithms, models which are there to check for the confidence level. But because just saying that the OCR confidence is low is actually not a very good measure, because by nature, these deep learning networks are so confident, and they're overconfident actually, that they mess up. I mean, that's why we have hallucinations, because they think they know everything.
That's great, Alok. So what else? You said 6 products. Tell us about one more, which is where you have done something interesting.
So the second one is what we call Auriga. Auriga is a constellation of stars, as old, from human perspective, as Mesopotamian race, because it's a very, very well-known constellation. Pretty much all societies have it in their culture. And to us, what we are doing is with Colatio, we are actually creating knowledge management systems for companies. Now, LLMs, GPTs are all trained on internet data. They're not trained on a company data, because no company will give them the confidential data or give us the confidential. So the whole point in LLMs, if you get out of the B2C domain, because I can ask questions. Of course, we are all excited by it. You can ask questions. I can say, look, I have a 10-year-old son. He has a birthday party tomorrow. Can you tell me what I should do? And he'll give a good answer. And then I can then give a hint. Hey, but I want to get a clown. Is that a good idea? And then he'll tell me, the LLM will tell me all about the clown. Or I can ask questions about a culture. In Indian culture, on a birthday, you put a tilak. These are effectively hints that you're giving to an LLM. It's very similar as if you were training a child and then you were testing a child and giving hints to the child when the child is not able to completely go in the direction that you want. Works very well for B2C questions. There are some hallucinations where it just goes completely wild and answers wrong. It happens with humans, happens at least 100 times more with these machines. The problem is this only stops with, because I'm giving hints, which are often called prompts. And we don't like to call them prompt engineering, because there is less engineering, more, in my view, creativity, because I want it to go in a certain way. So I have to give the right hint, whether it's a human or it's the system, an LLM. So, but it doesn't work in a B2B domain, because now it has not been trained on that data. And now you are suddenly putting your data, let's say, 300,000 pages worth of bank data into it. And you want to ask questions. Hey, can you tell me, let's say it's an investment bank, and an investment bank or equity research group wants to compare the second quarter report with the third quarter report for Wells Fargo, right? They can say, hey, can you tell me what is the second quarter report, second quarter revenue versus third quarter revenue for Wells Fargo, for the company? Most likely LLM will be able to answer, because that's a pretty simple question. But then suppose I ask a question, what is the CASA deposits for Wells Fargo versus in Q2 versus Q3, second quarter versus now, even I don't really understand what CASA may mean. Actually, it is checking account plus savings accounts deposits. And now this is a complex question, because the report may not have, Wells Fargo may not have given an answer of CASA or even checking account plus savings. It may have given checking account and savings account separately. So you need to now combine. I mean, that's where human intelligence comes and somewhat LLM. So now somebody has to give that particular prompt. That look, you may be going in the wrong direction. I want checking account plus savings account. Now, if you do all of this prompt creativity or prompt engineering for the LLM for an internal data, the analyst will get frustrated and say, look, I might as well look at it myself rather than giving all these prompts. So what Auriga does is, it actually, just like Colatio tries to tell you as to where it could be wrong, Auriga is an automated prompt generation system using subject matter expertise. So it's basically will be different for, just like humans are different for accounting, and you have different humans in insurance, you have insurance underwriters. So Auriga has a semantic search layer, which is very, very specific and tailored with subject matter expertise to the particular industry vertical that you're talking.
So you're creating various personas with its own guardrails and its own prompt hints to say, do this, do that.
Prompts. Yeah, we can create prompts, because I don't know what you as a user will ask, right? So we can't create prompts, and we don't expect you to give prompts as a user, because then you'll get frustrated and you will say, I might as well do it myself. I might just review what the Wells Fargo quarterly reports say. So the semantic search engine has to come up with automated prompts, 15 to 20 automated prompts to answer your question. Now, if there are 100 prompts, just like with the human, the choices are too many, the child will get confused. Hey, you're giving me too many hints. Which one should I take? If you give too few hints, you may not hit the thing in the right thing. So the semantic search engine has to give, I mean, we've seen 15 to 20 is typically a good number. Maybe we'll
Very interesting. So this is then created for a specific use or specific use case. You create a
use case. Like for investment banking, we have a very specific use case. Now, there are areas which are much easier because you don't have subject matter expertise as much there. Like call centers, or somebody's asking about, hey, I want to visit Dubai. Can you tell me what is interesting places to check? Some of it is already in the internet. But so there are areas where you don't need so much subject matter expertise, and therefore you don't need an automated hint processing system or a prompt creation system. But then some areas are very complicated. And the most complex, of course, is healthcare, which we are not touching yet.
Okay, got it. Changing gears, let's talk about your previous avatar, where you were an EvaluServe, founded it, ran it for 14 years. Tell us about that journey. How was it in Gurgaon in that early time? And what do you see the impact of what you're doing now and what's happening in Gen AI on that whole industry, where people were just going offshore to do a bunch of knowledge work, in which you guys were pioneers, and lots of other people have been doing that work since then and making it into a big industry?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting era. And I think it's about every industry and every company that it goes through its growth, it flattens off, and then external factors come in and it begins to go down, or it needs to be revitalized. That is true about even Gurgaon. I mean, Gurgaon was a farmland. Americans often ask me about Gurgaon, that they're hearing a lot about it, and a lot of multinationals have moved there. And I said, yeah, in some sense, it's very similar to Silicon Valley. In 1965 to 1970, Silicon Valley was also farmland, and then Hewlett Packard came and it began to grow with Fairchild and then with Intel and so on. So Gurgaon, it was 30 years later. So that itself was a very interesting period for where we started the company. The knowledge process outsourcing industry was also interesting because here we were, instead of going with IT industry or business process outsourcing, which was getting very famous at that time, doing call centers from India, setting up companies which would clean up your invoices, begin to figure out your financial statements. We were talking about doing research analytics for investment banking, for McKinsey type strategy companies, Boston Consulting Group, and the like. So it was a very interesting area. One thing I learned was, which I actually write in the book also that I published about 10 months ago, is we as inventors, innovators, entrepreneurs get very excited. And we think because it's such an interesting technology or an interesting innovation, it's going to catch fire. It's going to sell like hotcakes. I'm guilty of it. I wrote at least 4-5 research papers, how much KPO will grow, knowledge process outsourcing will go in India during the next 10 years. By 2011, I think I said $11 billion. And it grew by only 2.5 or 3 billion. This is a typical problem we see, and this is a problem with Gen AI today. People are talking. McKinsey report says that total AI will have an economic impact of anywhere from 11 trillion, not billion, but trillion dollars to 22 trillion by 2030. Now, if you look at the total GDP of the world by 2030, it's currently 110 trillion. It's likely to be 156 trillion. So you're talking about 10% of the world's GDP will depend on AI. Right now, our analysis shows that there is no more than 30 billion of total worldwide that AI is making a change in. So this implies that you're more than doubling every year. And we know doubling is easy when you're starting from 0 or 1, but doubling becomes very hard when you're in the billions. And definitely very hard when you're in your trillions, almost impossible.
Right.
So, I mean, more recently, somebody said it'll be $100 trillion. And I wrote a small post on it saying that, look, the world economy will be 156, and you're saying $100 trillion means 2/3 of the world economy will depend on Gen AI. I'm not blaming these guys because I was myself part of the group which at that time got excited. I mean, this excitement always comes about, then investors get excited, then the general public gets excited, then the hype goes up through the roof, goes to outside Milky Way, and then everything falls back down on Earth.
Yeah. But, I think Bill Gates wrote this line many years ago in his book that technology, like many other of these changes, they change a lot less in the near term than people expect. But they change a lot more in the longer term than people also expect.
Absolutely. And that was chapter 1 of the book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution and 100 Years of AI. I bring that out, that each revolution had its hype. Railway was hyped in 1840. A lot of capital went in, railway tracks were put in, gigantic railway stations were created. The masses did not start using it till most of the railway companies collapsed. And then it became so cheap that you had not only people using it, you had freight moving. And suddenly Procter & Gamble, which was producing candles, soap, and some perfumes in Cincinnati, realized that the railway freight was so cheap, they can sell it in New York. Right? So there are unintended consequences. We would have never thought in 1996, sitting in IBM research, that one of the consequences will be social media coming out in 2005 to 2010 time. Telemedicine. I mean, so absolutely Bill Gates is right. And I bring that out that actually hype may be bad for the investors who lose their shirt, may be bad for innovators like us who become despondent when it goes bust, but is actually good for the society because a lot of capital and a lot of passion goes into it.
Sure. Okay.
So going back to the last aspect of your question, I do believe that these LLMs and what we are doing with Auriga will create a KPO 2.0 because you will not be again able to take away humans. That's not the aim right now. But again, the humans will become checkers rather than create, just like what I explained in relation. And it won't happen overnight. It won't even, in my view, won't even happen in the next 3 years. But I think over the next 10 years, the Indian outsourcing industry in general, but in particular, Indian IT industry and KPO industry and BPO industry will see a lot of change. KPO, particularly because of Gen AI and LLM, because a lot of KPO is about search and explore and, and asking questions about your data and about external data. So I do believe that that's going to happen. I'm still, by the way, involved only peripherally with EvaluServe. I still have quite a few shares. But because I'm running Scry, I can't. It's impossible. I'm the only founder. It's impossible for me to run.
Sure, I understand. Well, let's change gears. Talk a little bit about your personal stuff. Where were you born, and what was your childhood like?
I was born in Delhi in 1959. My childhood was. I don't think there was anything very different about. I mean, very out of the ordinary about my childhood. I was born in a middle-class family. My father was an advertising manager in a newspaper called The Statesman, probably the oldest newspaper along with the Times of India. Used to live in Karol Bagh in Delhi. Went to private school, which most people there go to anyway, especially at that time, but even now. Went to IIT Delhi. I didn't want to go to any other IITs because home was closed. I could go back to on Fridays home, get some really good food. And that so I mean, other than at that time, my passion in high school was cricket and math, and it continued for a long time. But other than that, I wouldn't say it was anything out of the ordinary or remarkable in any way.
You said your dad was an advertising executive. What do you think you have taken from him? What part of his personality, his value system, his beliefs, his way of doing things do you find reflecting in you, and what from your mother?
So most of it comes from my mother, and I think that is probably not only true about me, but many other people, because mothers are closer. They speak much more than dads do. I mean, men versus women issue, but also if they're homemakers, mothers are homemakers. They obviously spend more time with their kids. So I think I got a lot of personality or things that I do. I actually probably got it from her. One thing which I got it from him, he was very, very, very risk averse. But he was actually he was a master's. He had a master's in English and a master's in Urdu, and he would always tell me that you should learn more language. And I actually tried to avoid, which was a very big mistake. I could have learned Sanskrit in high school, and I blew it off. I could have learned German because it was required in my PhD by Hopkins. I blew that off. And in retrospect, I thought that was a very big mistake. But the thing he told me was a particular verse from Urdu, which I'll say it out and then I'll translate it. घुड़सवार ही मैदानी जंग में गिरते हैं, वो तिफल क्या गिरेंगे जो घुटनों के बल चलते हैं. That it's only riders, horse riders, who are fighting the war will fall down. But if you're just crawling on the floor, it's almost impossible for you to fall down. So you have to take risks to become a horse rider, and you will fall down. You have to just assume that. And that, I think, has reverberated with me for, I mean, pretty much throughout my life.
Very interesting. So even though he was risk averse, he gave you something which you have used to take some risks in life.
Exactly. He was extremely risk averse. And in retrospect, when he passed away a few years ago, then I would think that, look, it was very interesting that he was so risk averse, and yet he would speak. I mean, he would say this probably once a month at least, if not more.
Interesting. And from your mom?
From my mom, I learned a lot. I mean, one I learned was that she, unfortunately, because women were not supposed to be educated. I mean, when she grew up in 1925, she was taken out, but she was extremely, extremely intelligent. And she, even though she had just passed eighth grade, after that, she continued reading newspapers and so on. And what I learned from her was reading at least half an hour to an hour a day. It actually keeps you on your toes.
Very
I
interesting.
have actually, fortunately, continued. I still try to browse through five different types of news media. I don't have any accounts on Facebook, etc., because that's just too time consuming, too much of a time sink. But five like CNN, MSNBC, Yahoo, a few others, and then five in India, Hindustan Times, Statesman. Just browse through the most important ones. Takes me about an hour, and that is something I learned from it. But then there are many other things I learned from. She was actually a risk taker as opposed to my dad. So
Very interesting. Okay, well, the next section, I'm going to ask you some quick questions. No right, wrong answer. Whatever comes to your mind, that's the right answer. What's your favorite cuisine? What's your comfort food?
I think Indian cuisine would be my favorite, followed by Chinese.
What's a favorite book? If you were meeting a nephew who hadn't met and you wanted to give him some advice or her some advice and wanted to gift a book, which one would you give them?
Over the years, I've become very, very fond of Hindu culture, not Hindu religion, but Hindu culture. And even though it is hard to understand, I think it is worthwhile spending the time and effort. So actually, I would give him Bhagavad Gita, not any translation. I mean, translation in English, sure, but not anyone's views. And I would say I want you to just read chapter 1 and chapter 2, because I think I don't look at Krishna as a god or Lord Krishna. And I don't even know whether he spoke Bhagavad Gita completely, or whether it was entirely an imagination of the writer Ved Vyas, who was writing it to explain things about the universe, about Indian society. So I would like to, I mean, and I go back and forth, and that's something which I would like to give to a person and tell him that, look, read it and actually analyze it. Don't go and go to anybody else and listen for their views. Get your own views.
Yeah. What activity besides your work and family gives you joy?
So as I said earlier, I'm more of an accidental entrepreneur. I consider more of as a builder, being engineers that you and I are. So one of the things which I have enjoyed, and again, it happened by happenstance, that I started building houses. So in New York, I built about 16 houses, and I was also my arms got twisted 15 or 16 to build a Hindu temple upstate New York. And then I built my own house here in Silicon Valley, and then one other house. So, I actually, how do I build it? I designed them quarter-inch to a foot scale by hand. And then I give it to, originally I would give it to a person to draft it into a blueprint. That was in 2000, up to 2000. 2005, it became all computer-aided design. So now I still give it to somebody to put it on a computer-aided design. Then I'll hire 16 contractors, not give it to a general contractor, and then build. So that, to me, it's a passion. It's not a hobby because it takes too much time. And I haven't done it, frankly, since I started Scry, because Scry Analytics, I'm the only founder, so I don't have time to build houses. But
Very interesting. Okay. Maybe I'll call you up, Alok, and I want to build a house, get a design from you.
Design,
Okay.
I've seen engineers, our designs are much different than architects, by the way. Engineers by nature are less artistic and more, hey, does it work or doesn't it work? Is it
Functional.
good? Functional, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is your biggest concern about the state of the world?
My, I think I'm not the only one. I do believe that we as a society is not putting enough effort to on things related to climate change, and I think it'll come and hit us fairly hard. And when it hits us, it will there will be millions of people whose livelihoods will be destroyed, and some may die or may get really health-wise get hurt very badly. And I think we are putting too much effort on AI and job losses and jobs gained, which again, as I said in when we were discussing KPO, I don't think that is going to happen anytime soon. And by the time 2050 comes along and you have jobs losses and jobs gained, the human population would have stabilized and would start declining, because 55 countries would have a declining population. India would have a stable population at that time. So we will literally be begging AI to be doing the work for us, because we won't have enough people who are in the working age group to do the work. So I'm not actually worried about AI. I'm more worried about climate change. And it reminds me of what happened in 1960s, which of course a lot of people either don't know or have forgotten about it, that we had a massive famine in India and China during those periods. And everyone thought that India and China will just deteriorate and go down. I think India lost something like 5 or 6 million people because of starvation. China, nobody really knows, but the stories are awful. Probably they lost much more, many more people. But then the Green Revolution came. So the good news is humans, once they put their mind to it, they can solve even the most complex problems. Big problems. The bad news is that it takes a lot for human society to realize that this is an enormous problem and the human race, Homo sapiens, are at stake at this point. Right. And that is what my biggest worry is.
Okay. We are way past our time, but we close out with this most important question. What is brand Alok Aggarwal in your own words?
I would say there are 5 or 6 characteristics I would like to have and I would like to portray: passion, innovation, humility, above all, because we always rise on the shoulders of others, integrity, and grit. Grit is hard work to achieve your passion to me. And I often call it PIHIG for in short: passion, innovation, humility, integrity, and
wow. Integrity, and what's the last one?
Grit. G-R-I-T, grit. Okay. So the ability to literally turn your passion into reality. I mean, that's the perseverance. Always reminds me of I start the book on the first chapter with the following interesting episode. In early 1900s, Edison's very good friend, Robert Malloy, visited Edison in his lab. And he says, for all the work you have done for so many years in creating a nickel iron battery, you have nothing to show for. And Edison's quipped by saying, why, man? I know thousands of ways in which I can't make nickel iron battery anymore.
There you go.
So that's the grit, right? That's the grit of creating an incandescent lamp bulb or a nickel iron. And that is what I think we innovators require. That is what human society requires, is to convert passion into something you need extreme amount of, because you will fall down from the horse every now and then.
Thank you so much for joining us, Alok. It was wonderful to catch up with you and record this. And there you have it, people. The brand for today, Alok Aggarwal, the PIHIG man. I think that should be like the title of your book. What's your book called, by the way?
The Fourth Industrial Revolution and 100 Years of AI, 1950 to 2050. It's on Amazon. We are actually converting into an audio conversation, 35 conversations of approximately half an hour each, which we'll put on Salman Khan Academy and Khan Academy and Coursera free of charge. Yeah.
Excellent. There you have it. Thank you so much, Alok, once again.
Thanks, Sandeep. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.